At one of the city's most luxurious high-rise buildings, a wealthy CEO sits alone playing chess in solitude until a maintenance worker walks in and disrupts her private space. Annoyed and frustrated, the CEO makes a reckless offer, "Beat me and I'll marry you." What she doesn't know is that the man mopping her floors was once one of the greatest chess minds in the world. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The 55 The Floor Executive Lounge shimmered with the incandescent glow of the late afternoon, casting long contemplative shadows as Vivian Albright, a woman of formidable presence, meticulously arranged her chessboard, lost in the intricate dance of strategy. A soft, almost imperceptible rapping at the frosted glass door gently fractured her deep concentration. "Enter," she commanded, her voice a cool, composed murmur without so much as a glance upwards. A tall, powerfully built man, clad in the practical, unassuming uniform of the building's maintenance crew, silently glided into the expansive room, his utility cart rolling with a soft, almost reverent hum. As he quietly began his assigned tasks, the particular configuration of the chess pieces, a silent testament to a deep intellectual conflict, inexplicably captured his attention, and she, with an almost imperceptible shift of her gaze, became acutely aware of his lingering observation. Impulsively driven by a complex cocktail of profound solitude and perhaps an undeniable simmering arrogance, she allowed a faint, knowing smirk to grace her lips, and then with a calculated audacity that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of their disparate lives, she articulated an offer that felt simultaneously reckless and profoundly significant. "Defeat me in a single game of chess, and I shall pledge my hand in marriage to you." The man, whose movements had hitherto been marked by an almost ethereal efficiency, halted abruptly, his broad shoulders squaring. He turned to face her fully, his serious dark brown eyes, deep pools of untold stories, locking directly onto hers. "My name is Elijah, ma'am," he responded, his voice a low, resonant baritone imbued with an unexpected gravity. "And I play not for sport, but for the very essence of existence." Vivian Albright had for more than a decade and 2 years unequivocally dominated her carefully sculpted dominion within the intricate tapestry of the corporate world, meticulously transforming her father's modest financial advisory firm into a sprawling multi-continental conglomerate through the sheer, unyielding force of her formidable will and an incisive intellect that cleaved through the most convoluted boardroom machinations with the precision of a master craftsman's blade. At 38 years of age, she possessed virtually every tangible asset she had ever ardently desired: an unassailable reputation, an unparalleled professional triumph, and a prodigious accumulation of wealth sufficient to acquire almost any conceivable luxury, save for that singular, elusive entity that had consistently slipped through her grasp. Affection, in its purest, most profound manifestation, had invariably proven itself to be a prohibitive extravagance, a delicate bloom unable to withstand the arid climate of her relentless ambition or the corrosive, acid-like jealousy of those who envied her meteoric ascent. Men in her lived experience invariably sought either to subjugate her unyielding spirit or to be subsumed by her overwhelming presence. And of both such exhaustive, predictable games, she had grown exquisitely weary a considerable time ago. The magnificent chess set that rested before her, its very presence imbued with the weight of cherished memories, was a revered heirloom, a tangible link to her paternal lineage. Each exquisite piece, painstakingly carved from lustrous rosewood and pristine maple, stood as a miniature masterpiece of artisanal craftsmanship. She had absorbed the ancient strategies of the game, seated attentively at her father's knee, in an era when his unwavering affirmation still possessed an immeasurable significance. That was long before the insidious tendrils of cancer had mercilessly claimed him, leaving her utterly alone with a burgeoning empire she had never explicitly requested, yet one she found herself utterly incapable of relinquishing. Presently, the venerable game of chess served as her profoundest form of contemplative meditation, an indispensable sanctuary from the relentless, unceasing demands of her preeminent leadership role. Within the 64 meticulously delineated squares of the board, she unearthed a pristine, unblemished clarity that was conspicuously absent from the often murky waters of the corporate environment. Every singular movement carried far-reaching ramifications. Every strategic choice held an undeniable weight of consequence, and ultimate triumph invariably gravitated towards those discerning minds capable of conceptualizing the most distant and intricate future permutations. Elijah Vance, by stark contrast, navigated an entirely distinct cosmological realm, a universe not meticulously gauged by the fluctuating metrics of quarterly fiscal gains, but rather by the modest accumulation of daily incremental victories and the unwavering fundamental exigencies of moment-to-moment survival. At 41 years of age, he traversed the towering, resplendent glass and steel edifices of the metropolitan core with an almost ethereal, unobserved efficacy, the hallmark of the diligent, often overlooked working class. His very presence was typically acknowledged only in the unsettling event of an unforeseen malfunction or an unexpected disruption. His broad, formidable shoulders bore a burden far greater than the mere heft of his industrial-grade cleaning apparatus. They silently carried the accumulated hopes, the persistent anxieties, and the profound aspirations of a man who had, with deliberate purpose, surrendered virtually everything for the promise of his beloved daughter's unfettered future. The rarefied world of competitive chess had once resonated with his name, recognizing him as a bona fide prodigy, a precocious teenager who had gracefully glided across international tournament boards with the lyrical elegance of a consummate poet and the unyielding predatory instinct of a seasoned hunter. But that was a lifetime ago, before the ineffable tragedy of Aisha's passing. Before 9-year-old Nia's relentless asthma attacks had begun to mercilessly steal her breath in the suffocating stillness of the deep night. Before the crushing deluge of insurmountable medical expenses and the ceaseless sleepless vigils by her bedside, and the stark painful realization that even the most profound intellectual genius held absolutely no meaning whatsoever if one proved incapable of safeguarding the precious lives of those one loved with an unwavering devotion. Presently, he diligently cleaned corporate offices for a meager $15 per hour, supplemented by the fragile lifeline of benefits, the precise variety of stable, predictable employment that offered the indispensable solace of comprehensive health insurance and reliably consistent schedules. His previous existence, that dazzling high-stakes realm of intellectual combat, now felt like a half-remembered dream he had once long ago experienced. Exquisitely beautiful, tantalizingly distant, and utterly profoundly irrelevant to the man he had painstakingly forged himself into, Nia Vance embodied the brightest, most radiant constellation in her father's deliberately circumscribed universe, a remarkably precocious 9-year-old, endowed with her late mother's gentle, nurturing spirit and her father's exceptionally discerning intellect. Her chronic asthma had, until quite recently, remained a manageable, though ever-present concern. However, the debilitating attacks were now occurring with an alarming frequency, escalating in their profound severity. Each agonizing episode served as a stark, visceral reminder of the inherent fragility of their meticulously constructed life, a delicate edifice perpetually teetering on the precipice of unforeseen collapse. She retained only fragmented memories of her mother, evanescent wisps of a cherished past, but she distinctly recalled the venerable chess set that remained perpetually on their kitchen table, the very same set her father would sometimes gaze upon with a profound, almost mournful intensity when he believed she was not observing him. His calloused fingers, worn from years of honest toil, would gently, almost reverently trace the familiar contours of the chess pieces as if reconnecting with long-lost cherished companions. The modest yet impeccably maintained apartment they shared was a living testament to their resilience, overflowing with Nia's vibrant, imaginative artwork, and permeated by the quiet, pervasive desperation of a solitary parent, striving with unwavering resolve to imbue every aspect of their challenging existence with a semblance of normalcy when in truth nothing felt genuinely secure. The cavernous conference room, once a symbol of Celeste's undisputed authority, now seemed to perceptibly contract around them as Elijah approached the polished chess table with deliberately measured, purposeful steps. Vivian had, in her initial self-assured estimation, fully anticipated that he would either erupt into peals of incredulous laughter or offer some form of self-deprecating, perhaps even deferential remark concerning his presumed unfamiliarity with the intricate movements of the chess pieces, thereby effortlessly re-establishing the preordained natural hierarchy of their vastly different worlds. Instead, he was engaged in an intensely focused, almost surgical examination of the chessboard, his large, powerful hands hovering with a surprising, almost delicate grace over the intricately carved pieces, their movements imbued with the meticulous precision of a seasoned surgeon meticulously scrutinizing an X-ray. "You are currently engaged in a queen's gambit, I observe," he remarked, his voice a calm, steady cadence, specifically the declined classical variation. "It appears you consistently favor a calculated, overarching control over the more volatile, unpredictable realm of tactical complications." It was not phrased as a question, but rather as an unequivocal statement of insightful observation, and the startling, unblemished accuracy of his assessment caused an unprecedented, almost imperceptible flutter deep within Vivian's chest. It was perhaps the sharp sting of profound surprise, or quite possibly the nascent, tentative stirring of genuine, unfeigned interest she had experienced in a great many years. "You appear to possess a rather profound familiarity with the nuances of the board," she responded, striving with a conscious effort to maintain her carefully cultivated casual tone, while simultaneously re-evaluating with a newfound and intense scrutiny the man who now sat directly opposite her. Up close, in the revealing intimacy of their shared space, she could discern the luminous intelligence that gleamed within the depths of his eyes, the carefully guarded way he composed himself, as if perpetually accustomed to the pervasive, unthinking inclination of others to habitually underestimate his capabilities. "Are you unequivocally certain you wish to accept this unconventional proposition of mine? I do not, as a general rule, experience defeat with any significant frequency." Elijah responded, a rare, captivating smile slowly unfolding across his entire face, utterly transforming his countenance. "Neither do I," he stated simply, his voice imbued with quiet confidence, his powerful hand reaching deliberately for the pristine white queen's pawn. "Shall we then, with due ceremony, meticulously reset the board?" What transpired next was without hyperbole the most profoundly intense and intellectually challenging chess game of Vivian's entire life. Elijah played with an astonishing fluid grace that spoke volumes of countless years of dedicated serious study and meticulous refinement. Each move flowed with an organic, seemingly preordained inevitability from the last, as if he were meticulously executing a pre-written script visible only to his own discerning eyes. His opening strategy was classically sound, yet remarkably creative, swiftly establishing an undeniable command of the central squares, while simultaneously expertly concealing his deeper, more intricate strategic intentions. Vivian found herself unconsciously leaning forward, her customary unshakable confidence perceptibly dissolving as the stark realization dawned upon her that she was undeniably confronting a player of truly prodigious, undeniable skill. By the 10th meticulously executed move, a profound, unsettling certainty solidified within her. She was unquestionably in a precarious predicament. By the 15th move, she was engaged in a desperate, unyielding struggle for her very survival upon the unforgiving landscape of the board. Elijah's pieces maneuvered with an almost surgical precision, each calculated capture and every deliberate advance forming an integral part of a sprawling, magnificent strategic tapestry that was only now, with chilling clarity, beginning to reveal its grand design. He was not merely engaged in the act of playing chess. He was, with an almost artistic mastery, conducting a profound, intricate symphony of strategy, each note building inexorably towards an inevitable, breathtaking crescendo. "Check," Elijah announced softly, his voice devoid of any discernible emotion. His knight, a dark silhouette against the lighter squares, had found a square that seemed to materialize from an ethereal void, utterly unanticipated. Vivian stared transfixed at the board, her formidable mind racing with a desperate urgency through a labyrinthine array of possible defensive maneuvers, each painstakingly conceived solution crumbling under the relentless scrutiny of her own incisive analysis. She instinctively moved her king to a perceived sanctuary, but even as she executed the move, she could with a chilling prescience perceive the impenetrable walls of his strategic design inexorably closing in around her. Check," he reiterated, his voice still a soft, controlled murmur. A different piece, this time its menacing presence emerging from an angle she had utterly failed to anticipate, striking with the swift, unforgiving precision of a coiled viper. Her palms were inexplicably genuinely perspiring now, a phenomenon that had not occurred since the monumental high-stakes moment of her very first major presentation to the assembled board of directors some 18 years ago. The third definitive check arrived with the startling resounding impact of a sudden deafening thunderclap reverberating through the hushed room. "Checkmate," Elijah announced, though his tone held no overt sense of triumphant exultation, only a profound, quiet satisfaction, a serene acknowledgement of a masterpiece completed. The final position was a breathtaking tableau of elegant brutality, her hapless king inextricably ensnared within an intricate, inescapable web woven from his perfectly positioned pieces. No conceivable escape remained. The game, a swift, decisive battle of intellects, was brought to its inexorable conclusion in precisely 25 meticulously executed moves. The very chessboard seemed to mock her, its polished surface reflecting her utterly defeated countenance as she stared transfixed at the final immutable position. Every single piece stood as an irrefutable testament to her complete and utterly unequivocal vanquishment. Vivian Albright, the formidable titan who had meticulously constructed an immense corporate empire through years of painstaking calculation and unparalleled strategic foresight, had been outmaneuvered, outwitted, and utterly dismantled by a man whose very existence she had barely condescended to acknowledge a mere 5 minutes earlier. The Ivory King, a symbol of her vanquished reign, lay forlornly on its side, where she had, in a gesture of profound, almost visceral capitulation, tipped it over in an act of surrender. And somehow, that small, almost unconscious gesture felt in its raw, unadorned honesty like the most genuine and unfeigned action she had undertaken in what felt like an eternity. "You meticulously orchestrated my downfall. You hustled me," she finally articulated, her voice carrying an unexpected brittle fragility she barely recognized as her own. The words, when they finally emerged, were sharper, more accusatory than she had consciously intended, tinged with a raw, undeniable anger that was in truth directed more fiercely at her own profound misjudgment than at him. "You deliberately permitted me to harbor the erroneous belief that you were merely some random, inconsequential individual who happened by sheer chance to possess a rudimentary understanding of how the various pieces traversed the board." Elijah, with an almost ritualistic care, began the methodical process of resetting the chessboard, each individual piece finding its designated starting square with the precise practiced movements of a sacred rite. "I never at any point asserted that I was merely some random individual," he replied with an unyielding, unwavering composure. "You made that profound assumption solely due to the nature of my professional occupation. There exists a fundamental, undeniable distinction." The piercing accuracy of his understated observation struck her with the force of a physical blow, a stinging slap to her inherent unexamined arrogance, compelling her to confront the profound casual prejudice that had so unequivocally guided her to this humbling moment. She had, with an unthinking condescension, observed his plain practical coveralls and his utilitarian cleaning cart, and in that fleeting dismissive moment she had reduced him in her mind to a simplistic preconceived stereotype, never for an instant daring to conceive that a profound incisive intelligence might flourish and thrive outside the narrow, carefully circumscribed confines of her opulent corporate sphere. The abrupt jarring realization was acutely uncomfortable, akin to the disquieting discovery of a vast, gaping blind spot within her peripheral vision, a persistent lacuna that had in fact been subtly present all along. "Where precisely did you acquire the ability to play with such unparalleled mastery?" she inquired, her voice now imbued with an unfeigned genuine curiosity that had for the moment decisively overridden her wounded, smarting pride. That performance was unequivocally not a mere consequence of serendipitous fortune or beginner's luck. "You systematically, mercilessly dismantled me with an almost surgical precision." Elijah, having meticulously placed the final pawn, slowly lifted his gaze to meet hers, those unsettling, deep, dark brown eyes holding a profound, unreadable depth. "I was fortunate enough to have some exceptionally gifted instructors during my formative years," he revealed, and in the quiet, reflective cadence of his tone she detected an almost imperceptible undercurrent that powerfully suggested a hidden narrative, a story brimming with a profound depth she could at that moment barely begin to fathom. Chess at one point was the very fabric of my existence, the central axis around which my entire life revolved before other far more compelling obligations assumed an undeniable paramount significance. The profound, evocative phrase hung suspended in the charged air between them, heavily laden with unarticulated implications that ignited within her an almost overwhelming desire to articulate a dozen probing follow-up questions. But before she could even begin to formulate the words, Elijah was already rising with an almost preternatural grace from his chair, meticulously guiding his cleaning cart towards the door with the identical quiet efficacy that had moments earlier brought him into the precise trajectory of her orbit. "Thank you profoundly for the game, Miss Albright," he articulated with an unassailable formality. "I must regrettably resume my assigned rounds." Vivian watched his retreating figure, her mind a turbulent maelstrom of unasked questions and nascent realizations. The spacious conference room, once a symbol of her dominion, now felt subtly altered, perceptibly smaller somehow, as if his unexpected presence had, for a fleeting time, expanded the very dimensions of the space, and his subsequent absence had left it irrevocably diminished. She directed her gaze downwards at the meticulously reset board, the pieces arranged in their eternal, expectant starting positions, and felt an unfamiliar, profound hollowness begin to resonate deep within her chest. For the remainder of the week, her thoughts, with an almost relentless persistence, gravitated towards the quiet, unassuming janitor who had, with such disarming grace and utter thoroughness, so unequivocally humbled her. It was an offhand remark from her executive assistant Sarah concerning the imperative need to meticulously update the building's extensive service contractor database that inadvertently furnished her with the precise, unimpeachable justification she required. Employee background checks, she meticulously rationalized to herself, are an entirely routine and indispensable component of our comprehensive corporate security protocols. Even as she discreetly accessed Elijah Vance's digital file on her secure computer late one Thursday evening, what she ultimately uncovered within its digital confines caused her to recoil abruptly in her chair, as if she had been physically unceremoniously struck. The foundational information appeared on initial inspection entirely unremarkable: 41 years of age, widowed, with a singular dependent child, a pristine driving record, and absolutely no discernible criminal history. Yet deeply embedded within the intricate employment history section, there resided a single, unassuming line of text, a pivotal fragment of information that irrevocably altered the entirety of her perception. Previous occupation: professional chess player, USCF rating 2510. Her hands inexplicably began to tremble as she meticulously cross-referenced that astonishing rating with the official authoritative databases maintained by the National Chess Federation. The cold, objective numbers, when viewed in their proper context, narrated a profoundly compelling story that left her utterly breathless with disbelief and something that bordered on an almost reverent awe. Elijah Vance had not merely been a professional chess player. He had been an authentic, undisputed prodigy, a precocious teenager who had, with breathtaking skill, dominated the national junior circuits throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. Tournament reports, some dating back as far as 2 decades, universally described him as brilliantly intuitive and utterly fearless, a tactical genius possessing an almost mystical, innate understanding of the most labyrinthine and complex chess positions. The deeper she delved into the digital archives, the more profoundly remarkable his intricate life story became. He had attained the coveted title of International Master at the extraordinarily young age of 17, barely missing the crucial Grandmaster norms due to an unforeseen, devastating family tragedy that had, with cruel timing, irrevocably pulled him away from the intense competitive realm of professional play precisely as he was on the very precipice of reaching his absolute, undeniable peak. Numerous forum posts from an ardent, lamenting community of chess enthusiasts speculated with a mournful curiosity about the fate of that Vance kid who could have been the next legendary Fischer, their words brimming with poignant questions. Speculation abounded concerning a monumentally promising career abruptly truncated by utterly mysterious, inexplicable circumstances. The enigma was with a chilling finality unraveled by a death certificate she uncovered through painstaking public record searches. Aisha Marie Vance, age 32, succumbed to aggressive breast cancer, survived by her devoted husband Elijah and their beloved daughter Nia. The date on the certificate indicated 9 years ago a somber realization that meant he had been diligently caring for a terminally ill wife and a vulnerable toddler when he had, with an unimaginable resolve, irrevocably departed from the demanding world of professional chess, perhaps forever. The magnitude of his sacrifice was staggering in its comprehensive totality. He had relinquished not merely a potentially illustrious career, but an entire vibrant identity, an inherent sense of self. He had, with a profound act of self-effacement, painstakingly transformed himself from a meteoric rising star into a humble custodian solely for the unyielding sake of his family's fundamental survival. Vivian found herself staring intently at faded tournament photographs from his glorious, triumphant days, meticulously studying the intense young man with the fiercely focused eyes and the unyielding, confident smile. That past iteration of Elijah Vance had inhabited a glamorous, exhilarating world of ubiquitous international travel, lucrative corporate sponsorships, fawning magazine interviews, and substantial appearance fees. A life that could have comfortably secured his financial future for a lifetime. He had, with an act of profound, immeasurable love, willingly traded all of it for the humble assurances of comprehensive health insurance and a reliably steady paycheck, deliberately rendering himself virtually invisible so that his precious daughter could continue to simply breathe. The crushing weight of her earlier casual dismissiveness settled upon her now with the palpable oppressiveness of a physical burden. She had, in her monumental arrogance, observed his utilitarian work clothes and his quite unassuming demeanor, and had, without a second thought, erroneously assumed he was intellectually beneath her, never for an instant even contemplating the possibility that he had in fact sacrificed more than she had ever, in her most ambitious dreams, managed to achieve. The man who had, with such effortless grace, so thoroughly vanquished her had been engaged in the demanding intellectual combat of chess at its most exalted echelons when she was still merely grappling with the rudimentary principles of corporate balance sheets. Beyond that, and perhaps even more profoundly, he had, with a selflessness she could barely comprehend, voluntarily surrendered genuine greatness for the sake of an unyielding, profound love, a concept she had never truly understood because she had, in her relentless pursuit of power, never loved anyone or anything more profoundly than she cherished the intoxicating taste of unadulterated success. The ensuing morning found her in an uncharacteristic state of profound distraction and unsettling restlessness, utterly incapable of concentrating on the relentless stream of meetings and momentous decisions that typically consumed every fiber of her attention. She had, with a burgeoning sense of purpose, meticulously planned to seek him out directly to offer a sincere, heartfelt apology for her egregious assumptions, and perhaps with a touch of hopeful temerity to challenge him to another game. But fate, with its unpredictable capriciousness, intervened in the dramatic, urgent form of a sudden medical emergency, an unforeseen crisis that would, with a stark finality, strip away the last vestiges of her carefully constructed pretenses. She was in the process of departing the towering edifice around 7:00 in the evening when her ears, suddenly alert, registered the distinct sounds of commotion emanating from the cavernous parking garage below. It was a man's voice, taut with an almost unbearable panic, speaking rapidly and indistinctly to what sounded like an emergency dispatcher. Following the urgent sound, she located Elijah kneeling beside a small, fragile girl who was engaged in a desperate, visible struggle to draw a breath. Her tender lips were tinged with a faint, unsettling blue, her wide, desperate eyes mirroring the particular visceral terror of someone slowly succumbing to a drowning in the very air itself. "Naya, my sweet girl, just try to relax, darling." Elijah was murmuring his voice, despite the palpable, almost radiating fear that emanated from every rigid line of his powerful body, remarkably steady. "The ambulance is on its way. Okay, Daddy's right here, my love." In his trembling hand, he clutched an inhaler that was, with heartbreaking clarity, unequivocally failing to provide sufficient relief. And Vivian could, with a sharp pang of empathy, discern the raw, unadulterated desperation in his frantic, tender movements as he tirelessly attempted to position his beloved daughter in a way that might even incrementally alleviate her agonizing struggle to breathe. Without a moment's hesitation, without any conscious thought, Vivian dropped her meticulously organized briefcase to the cold concrete floor and swiftly retrieved her pristine phone. "This is Vivian Albright," she announced to the emergency operator, her voice resonating with the same commanding authority that had effortlessly controlled boardrooms for 15 years. "I require an ambulance dispatched to the Lumina Corporation headquarters parking garage immediately. We have a child experiencing severe respiratory distress, and I am furthermore unequivocally authorizing the immediate use of my company's executive helipad for emergency medical transport if such a measure proves necessary." The subsequent hour passed in a disorienting, bewildering blur of swiftly moving paramedics and gleaming oxygen tanks of Elijah's ashen-drawn face as he climbed with a desperate urgency into the ambulance beside his daughter's small stretcher, of Vivian almost unconsciously following in her own sleek car because somehow inexplicably the very notion of leaving felt utterly impossible. At the sprawling, sterile hospital, she found herself in the uniquely uncomfortable position of being simultaneously indispensable and utterly profoundly useless. Her comprehensive insurance information and unequivocal emergency authorizations effortlessly smoothed Nia's path through the chaotic, urgent triage process, but she could only watch with a gnawing helplessness as Elijah disappeared behind the imposing double doors of the pediatric emergency department. She waited in the stark, impersonal family lounge, enveloped by the peculiar, almost palpable mixture of fragile hope and crushing despair that hospitals, with their inherent nature so adeptly cultivated, checking her sleek phone every few fleeting minutes for updates she instinctively knew, with a sinking heart, would not materialize. When Elijah finally emerged after what felt like an interminable 4 hours, his face was deeply drawn with an all-encompassing exhaustion, but it was mercifully no longer shadowed by the dark cloud of panic. Nia was now stable, he reported, responding remarkably well to the nebulizer treatments, and was in all likelihood expected to be discharged in the morning if her vital oxygen levels remained consistently steady. "Thank you truly," he said simply, his voice imbued with a quiet, profound sincerity, and she could, with a piercing clarity, perceive in the depths of his eyes that he understood, with an almost prescient precision, the full, life-altering significance of her decisive intervention. They spent the entire ensuing week finding increasingly elaborate excuses to engineer their encounters casual meetings that, despite their outward appearance, felt anything but accidental, permeated instead by an undeniable undercurrent of burgeoning connection. Vivian began with a conscious purpose, taking her coffee breaks in the bustling, sunlit lobby of the building during Elijah's afternoon shift, ostensibly reviewing complex corporate reports, but in truth harboring the fervent hope of catching fleeting glimpses of him as he diligently went about his work. He, in turn, seemed to discover increasingly plausible justifications to meticulously clean the executive floors with a heightened frequency. Their nascent conversations, initially hesitant, swiftly developed the easy, organic rhythm of two individuals discovering, with a delightful surprise, that they genuinely relished each other's company. The transformation within Vivian was, to those who knew her, intimately subtle, yet undeniably profound. It was first observed by her astute assistant Sarah, and subsequently noted by the seasoned senior partners who had over years grown accustomed to her almost arctic professional demeanor, a glacial facade of unwavering composure. She smiled more readily, laughed on occasion during meetings, and seemed in some inexplicable way more authentically present in conversations, no longer perpetually calculating 3 strategic moves ahead. The palpable transformation was alluring in ways that bore absolutely no relation to her outward physical appearance, and everything instead to the slow, captivating emergence of a deep-seated warmth that had been for countless years meticulously buried beneath impenetrable layers of corporate armor. For Elijah, the nascent friendship represented a different yet equally profound kind of revelation. He had grown so utterly accustomed to the pervasive invisibility that had enveloped him, to the consistent dismissal or outright disregard of his profound intelligence and his rich, complex history, that Vivian's genuine, unfeigned interest in his thoughts and candid opinions felt akin to stepping for the first time in years into the welcoming embrace of bright, life-giving sunlight after an eternity spent in the suffocating shadows. She inquired about his beloved daughter Nia with a true heartfelt curiosity about his distinguished chess background without a hint of condescension, and about his current, unassuming work with the profound respect typically accorded to honest labor, honestly and diligently performed. Nia, for her part, had, with an innocent curiosity, begun to ask probing questions about Daddy's new friend from work, the pretty lady who had so bravely helped them at the hospital, and who in some inexplicable, almost magical way, caused her father's typically stoic face to soften with an almost tender affection whenever he uttered her name. Children possessed an innate, intuitive understanding of their parents' complex emotional climate, and Nia could, with an astonishing clarity, discern the subtle yet undeniably significant shift in Elijah's daily mood, the way he seemed perceptibly lighter, more buoyant, and undeniably more hopeful than he had been since the profound, life-altering tragedy of her mother's passing. The three of them, with a burgeoning sense of togetherness, began to spend increasing amounts of time together beyond the sterile, often impersonal confines of gleaming office buildings and austere medical facilities. Their new routine included delightful Saturday afternoon excursions to the sprawling city park, where Nia could freely play on the vibrant playground while the adults engaged in quiet, meaningful conversation. There were also casual, comfortable dinners at family-friendly restaurants, where Vivian, with a quiet sense of wonder, marveled at the effortless, easy intimacy that existed so palpably between father and daughter. Then came the cozy movie nights at Elijah's modest brownstone in the city's historic jazz district, where she painstakingly learned to navigate the complex, often humorous negotiations required to select films deemed suitable for a 9-year-old's discerning viewing preferences. Vivian discovered with a profound and unexpected joy that she genuinely relished Nia's vivacious company, finding in the child's bright, unbridled curiosity and unguarded, unconditional affection something deeply nourishing that she had in her relentless pursuit of success, inexplicably forgotten she was so desperately missing. Nia, in turn, was utterly fascinated by this remarkably glamorous woman who, despite her elegant, princess-like attire, conversed with her with the respectful demeanor of a true equal, who possessed an intimate knowledge of intimidating boardrooms and intricate business deals, but who also, with a heartwarming sincerity, vividly remembered what it felt like to be 9 years old and utterly brimming with profound questions about the vast, mysterious world. The burgeoning closeness that developed between them felt profoundly natural and utterly inevitable, akin to the organic unfolding development of a meticulously played chess position where every successive move flowed with an undeniable logical precision from the one that preceded it. However, their burgeoning, deeply private happiness was imminently poised to collide with the harsh public scrutiny that inevitably accompanied Vivian's preeminent position and widespread prominence, thereby setting in motion a tumultuous series of events that would, with a relentless intensity, rigorously test the very foundations of everything they were so painstakingly constructing together. The insidious video materialized without warning on the company's internal social media platform on a Wednesday afternoon, surreptitiously posted by Caleb Jones, a junior associate embedded within the accounting department, who had, with a casual disregard for privacy, been working late the previous week. The surreptitious footage was grainy and indistinct, captured through the transparent glass wall of the conference room using his smartphone. Yet the accompanying audio was with an unsettling clarity, perfectly discernible Vivian's unmistakable voice articulating her reckless, impulsive offer, Elijah's measured, resonant response, the palpable, almost tangible intensity of their chess game, all compressed into a mere 120 seconds of compelling corporate drama. The accompanying caption emblazoned beneath the video read with an ironic glee, "When the CEO rashly pledges to marry the custodian if he dares to defeat her at chess, and he astonishingly achieves it in 3 masterful moves. Is this one, must inquire, legally binding?" The post was liberally adorned with laughing emojis and disseminated like wildfire across various departments with the viral, unrestrained enthusiasm that only the juiciest, most scandalous workplace gossip could genuinely ignite. By midday, the illicit video had been viewed by more than half of the entire company's workforce and forwarded with a reckless abandon to dozens of personal external accounts. The accompanying comment thread swelled with the malignant proliferation of a rapidly spreading tumor, its digital pages filled with rampant speculation concerning Vivian's personal life, crude jokes about inappropriate office romances, and increasingly pointed accusatory questions about whether company policy, in its most stringent interpretation, had been unequivocally violated. The Human Resources Department, overwhelmed by the sudden deluge, fielded no less than 23 frantic calls before the lunch hour, the overwhelming majority of them urgently requesting meticulous clarification about established fraternization policies and the exacting standards governing executive conduct. Vivian first became aware of the existence of the viral video when her meticulously organized assistant Sarah knocked tentatively on her office door, her face etched with an expression that unmistakably portended an incoming disaster of significant proportions. "Miss Albright, we appear to have encountered a rather sensitive situation," Sarah began, her voice carefully modulated. "There is regrettably a video currently circulating widely on the company's internal platform. It appears to depict you engaged in a game of chess with one of our esteemed maintenance staff members. The content, I must inform you, is unfortunately generating a considerable amount of discussion." The blood, in a sudden, alarming rush, drained completely from Vivian's face as she watched the incriminating footage, witnessing with a visceral pang of mortification her moment of impulsive flirtation transformed irrevocably into a public, humiliating spectacle for all to consume. The accompanying comments were without question far more egregious and soul-crushing than the video itself. A truly toxic admixture of virulent sexism and insidious classism that mercilessly reduced her to a grotesque caricature and contemptuously dismissed Elijah as a calculating gold digger relentlessly seeking to exploit her immense wealth and preeminent corporate position. The meticulously crafted professional persona she had painstakingly honed and defended for decades was now being mercilessly dissected by individuals who possessed absolutely no intimate knowledge whatsoever of her complex life or the myriad choices that had shaped her journey. Her phone rang incessantly throughout the agonizing afternoon, its insistent ringing a relentless torment. Board members, their voices laced with thinly veiled disapproval, expressed grave concerns about the potential damage to the corporate image. Business partners, their inquiries carefully worded and deceptively polite, made subtle probing inquiries about her judgment. Reporters from the voracious business press, ever hungry for scandal, eagerly hoped to transform mere workplace gossip into a sensationalized narrative concerning executive impropriety. Each successive conversation mercilessly chipped away at her carefully constructed composure, forcing her to defensively justify decisions she wasn't even entirely certain she fully comprehended herself. The most devastating call, a true blow to her very core, originated from Uncle Bernard, her paternal uncle, and the esteemed chairman of the board, whose profound disapproval carried the immense weight of both ingrained family disappointment and critical fiduciary responsibility. "Vivian, for heaven's sake, what precisely is all this absurd nonsense concerning your supposed marriage to the janitor? The entire board is profoundly concerned about your judgment, young lady. This particular brand of damaging publicity could irrevocably mar our hard-won reputation with our most valued clients." It was merely a jest, Bernard, she articulated tightly, a profound self-loathing curdling within her for the defensive, almost childish tone that had inexplicably crept into her own voice. A casual throwaway comment deliberately extracted from its original context by someone possessing far too much idle time and woefully insufficient discretion. "It does not by any stretch of the imagination appear casual in the video footage," he retorted coldly, his voice devoid of any warmth. "It appears in stark truth as though you are deliberately making a mockery of your esteemed position and by extension the inherent dignity of the entire company." That evening, she found herself with a burning sense of indignation directly confronting Elijah within the confines of the building's service elevator, her carefully constructed composure finally fracturing, splintering under the accumulated immense weight of public humiliation and unrelenting professional pressure. The man who had only days prior appeared so unequivocally noble and principled in the sterile high-stakes environment of the hospital now, in her distorted perception, seemed chillingly akin to a potential opportunist, someone who might, with a cunning deliberation, have meticulously orchestrated the entire distressing situation for the sole purpose of personal venal gain. "Did you know?" she demanded, foregoing any preamble, her voice sharp with accusation. "Did you know that treacherous little weasel Caleb was actively recording us? Was this entire charade some elaborate, meticulously planned scheme to deliberately embarrass me, or perhaps to strategically leverage yourself into a far more advantageous situation?" Elijah's face in response to her barrage went carefully blank, adopting the unreadable expression of someone who had through countless difficult experiences painstakingly learned to weather unmerited accusations without succumbing to the natural impulse to immediately fight back. "No," he responded simply, his voice a low, steady murmur. "I had no idea whatsoever that anyone was recording us. I desire absolutely nothing from you, Miss Albright, save for your authentic friendship, a connection which I am at this very moment apparently on the very precipice of irrevocably losing." My friendship. The words, when they finally escaped her lips, were even sharper, more cruelly cutting than she had intended, edged with the particular venomous cruelty that frequently arises from lashing out blindly at the very person most closely associated with the source of one's profound emotional pain. Is that, in your estimation, what you define as friendship, when you so publicly humiliate someone in front of their entire company, when you deliberately make them appear to be an utter fool, someone so utterly naive they cannot even discern when they are being ruthlessly hustled? "I never at any point hustled you," Elijah replied quietly, his voice maintaining an unyielding, dignified composure. "I merely played chess in the precise same manner I have played it for 2 decades. You, Miss Albright, impulsively offered something you harbored no genuine intention of fulfilling, and I, in turn, quite simply won a game you never in your wildest presumptions expected to lose. That, Miss Albright, is not a con. It is merely unequivocally what transpired." The unassailable reasonableness and calm dignity of his response served only to further inflame her already raw anger, making her feel in stark contrast utterly petty, hopelessly irrational, and undeniably small. Right, the noble, incorruptible custodian, too morally pristine to ever countenance taking advantage of a given situation. You must be, I presume, internally laughing at all of us, the utterly naive, wealthy idiots who in our privileged bubble never once suspected that the help might in fact possess actual functioning brains. Something of fleeting, almost imperceptible flicker manifested itself deep within Elijah's eyes. Then for the first time a discernible crack appeared in his painstakingly maintained composure. "You wish to know what precisely I am laughing at?" He countered, his voice now imbued with a quiet, potent fury. "I am laughing, Miss Albright, at myself for ever entertaining the foolish notion that you, of all people, were genuinely different. For naively believing that someone who so meticulously constructed an empire might just conceivably comprehend the profound visceral meaning of sacrificing everything, every single aspiration, for the unwavering love of the people you cherish most in this existence. But no, Miss Albright, you are merely precisely like all the others. To you, everything is an unfeeling transaction. Everyone without exception possesses a hidden angle, a veiled agenda, and God forbid, Miss Albright, that anyone should ever dare to exist outside the meticulously neat, predetermined boxes you have so carefully constructed for them." The service elevator, with a jarring mechanical ding that resonated with the mournful finality of a death knell, reached the ground floor, and its doors silently slid open. Elijah stepped out without so much as a backward glance, leaving Vivian utterly alone within the confined space, left only with the haunting echo of his raw, powerful words and the rapidly growing, suffocating realization that she had, in a fit of misguided anger, just irrevocably destroyed the single best, most meaningful development that had graced her life in what felt like an eternity. The ensuing few days blurred into a chaotic, relentless sequence of damage control and high-stakes corporate crisis management. The incriminating video was with swift efficiency removed from the company's internal platform, but by then it had already been extensively copied and widely shared across numerous social media channels, thereby acquiring a viral, uncontrollable life of its own, far beyond the circumscribed confines of mere corporate gossip. Vivian, with a desperate, almost feverish intensity, threw herself back into her work, staying late into the night to assiduously avoid the sympathetic yet subtly scrutinizing glances of her staff and the speculative, whispered conversations that seemed to follow her like an unwelcome shadow through the otherwise silent, echoing halls. She did not encounter Elijah again until the following Thursday, when Nia's chronic asthma, with a terrifying, unprecedented viciousness, launched an attack so severe that it sent them with a renewed sense of desperate urgency, racing back to the familiar, sterile confines of the emergency room. The urgent call came to her expansive office at 3:30 in the afternoon. It was Elijah's voice, taut and strained with a tightly controlled panic, inquiring if her previous insurance authorization was still valid, if she could, by some miracle, help them navigate the bewildering labyrinthine medical system just one more time. Vivian was already in her sleek car before he had even finished articulating his desperate plea, driving through the dense, chaotic downtown traffic with the single-minded, unwavering focus of someone who had, in that profound, urgent moment, finally identified what truly and unequivocally mattered in her life. She found them huddled together in the pediatric ward, Nia heartbreakingly small, hooked to a myriad of oxygen tubes, and looking impossibly frail in the vast impersonal hospital bed. Elijah was seated beside her, tightly clutching her small hand, desperately attempting to read her a story, while she, with heartbreaking effort, struggled to draw each precious breath. The profoundly raw sight of his tears, silent, utterly desperate, and completely unguarded, struck her with the devastating impact of a physical blow. This, she realized with a shudder, was what true, unadulterated fear genuinely looked like. This was what genuine unconditional love uncompromisingly demanded. This was what it unequivocally meant to have someone else's fragile life matter infinitely more than one's own deeply ingrained pride or carefully cultivated professional reputation. Standing in that stark, sterile room, helplessly observing a father's heart visibly breaking over his beloved daughter's agonizing, labored breathing, Vivian, with a profound, almost shattering clarity, finally understood the true, immense magnitude of her own inherent selfishness. She remained steadfastly through the entire night, not because her physical presence was strictly needed, but because the very thought of leaving felt to her, now awakened conscience, utterly impossible. Nia's critical condition finally stabilized around the fragile cusp of dawn, her oxygen levels slowly but surely climbing back into the comforting embrace of safe territory. The healthy, vibrant color gradually returned to her pale lips as the potent medications diligently performed their life-saving work. However, the recent terrifying crisis had unequivocally revealed something far more profound, something that could not, under any circumstances, be medicated away. The precious little girl was, with a chilling inevitability, progressively worsening. Her debilitating episodes were occurring with an alarming frequency and escalating in their terrifying severity. Her tiny, fragile body was slowly but relentlessly losing the arduous battle against a relentless medical condition that no amount of pure, unconditional love, however profound, could ever hope to miraculously cure. The doctor wishes to engage in a comprehensive discussion concerning more aggressive, potentially life-altering treatment options, Elijah said quietly, his voice a low, weary murmur as they sat together in the stark, impersonal family lounge, both of them exhausted far beyond the point of maintaining any semblance of social pretense. They are speaking of experimental therapies, consulting with highly specialized experts in other far-flung cities, the kind of intensive specialized care that, to be unequivocally honest, costs more than I could possibly earn in 7 long years. Vivian in that moment yearned with an almost desperate urgency to offer financial assistance, to write substantial checks that would instantly alleviate the immediate crushing financial burden. But she could, with a sharp, intuitive clarity, perceive in his weary, resigned face that any form of direct charity would only serve to drive him further irrevocably away. Instead, with a profound sense of trepidation, she articulated the far harder, more vulnerable question, "What, if anything, can I possibly do to assist?" "Nothing," he responded, his voice devoid of any discernible bitterness, merely a quiet resignation. "This, Vivian, is not a problem you possess the power to simply fix. Some things regretfully simply exist as they are immutable and unyielding." The quiet, profound acceptance in his voice caused a deep, aching sensation within her chest, a painful constriction that spoke of unshed, lingering tears. She had, for the entirety of her adult life, harbored the unwavering belief that every conceivable problem possessed a quantifiable solution, that a sufficient accumulation of wealth or influence or even the most astute strategic thinking could invariably surmount any obstacle, no matter how formidable. But here, standing before her, was a man she had come to profoundly care about, facing a profoundly devastating situation that could not by any means be managed or negotiated or bought off with a mere financial transaction, and her inherent helplessness in that poignant moment was complete, absolute, and utterly overwhelming. "I am so profoundly sorry," She finally articulated the words when they finally emerged, carrying the accumulated weight of years of unspoken regret. Sorry for what I so cruelly uttered in the elevator, for presuming the very worst about you, without cause, for embodying precisely the kind of person you quite rightly believed me to be. Elijah looked at her, his deep, dark brown eyes possessing an almost uncanny ability to perceive far too much of her innermost thoughts. You were afraid, he stated simply, his voice a gentle, understanding murmur. People, when gripped by profound fear, often utter words they do not, in their truer essence, genuinely mean. I comprehend that, Vivian. Can you forgive me? There is nothing, Vivian, to genuinely forgive. You reacted precisely in the manner anyone in your position would invariably react. I merely, perhaps foolishly, harbored the silent hope that you might just possibly be different. The quiet, profound devastation that resonated within his voice was far more acutely painful than any overt anger would have been. It was a stark, agonizing recognition that she had, in a moment of profound weakness, utterly failed to measure up to some unspoken lofty standard, a benchmark she had not even known existed until that very moment. She desperately wanted to argue, to vehemently defend herself, to meticulously explain the immense pressures that had, with an unrelenting force, driven her to lash out so indiscriminately. But all of those carefully constructed explanations felt in the face of his beloved daughter's desperate struggle to simply breathe like hollow, inadequate excuses. That same afternoon, Vivian, with a newfound and profoundly altered perspective, made a decisive choice. A course of action that would have utterly astonished anyone intimately familiar with her long-standing professional reputation for meticulously calculated risk assessment. She drove with a determined purpose to Elijah's apartment complex, a modest yet immaculately maintained collection of brownstone buildings that served as the humble abodes for the diligent working families who were the very backbone, the indispensable engine that kept the sprawling city functioning, and knocked tentatively on his door with absolutely no preconceived plan beyond the primal, undeniable need to simply try again. Nia answered the door, her small face looking perceptibly pale but remarkably alert, her breathing thankfully noticeably easier than it had been in the harrowing confines of the hospital. "Hi, Miss Vivian," she said, with the shy, endearing smile that never for an instant failed to melt something unexpectedly tender deep within Vivian's chest. "Daddy's in the kitchen making us the best grilled cheese sandwiches. Do you by any chance want some?" The profound domestic normalcy of the scene that unfolded before her. A devoted father lovingly cooking for his cherished daughter, the child innocently playing the comfortable, almost comforting chaos of a life lived not by the cold, calculating metrics of profit margins, but instead by the boundless, unwavering currency of pure, unadulterated love, caused Vivian's throat to constrict with a profound rush of emotion. This, she realized with a sudden searing clarity, was precisely what she had been so utterly terrified of losing to the corrosive blight of corporate gossip and the harsh, unforgiving crucible of professional judgment. This small, precious pocket of warmth blossoming within a world that had around her grown increasingly cold and impersonal. Elijah emerged from the bustling kitchen, his expression questioning a subtle mixture of surprise and cautious hope, but Nia, with an innocent eagerness, had already taken Vivian's hand, her small fingers warm against hers, and was leading her with a determined urgency to the unassuming kitchen table where the cherished chess set still sat in its place of honor, an unspoken testament to enduring connections. "Daddy taught me some wonderful new moves," the little girl announced proudly, her voice brimming with unbridled enthusiasm. "Do you want to see?" What then ensued was without question the most profoundly important chess lesson of Vivian's entire life. Though it bore absolutely no direct relation to intricate strategy or complex tactical maneuvers, Nia played with the unself-conscious, unbridled joy of someone for whom the game was an experience of pure, unadulterated pleasure, making moves that brazenly violated every fundamental principle of sound chess, yet somehow, in their very innocence, perfectly captured the ethereal essence of what truly made the venerable game beautiful. She narrated her every thought aloud, her imagination soaring meticulously, crafting elaborate fantastical stories for each individual chess piece, transforming the ancient solemn battlefield into a whimsical fairy tale where the humble pawns were valiant, brave peasants, and the majestic queen was a benevolent, nurturing ruler who steadfastly protected everyone. "You are clearly not playing with the objective of winning," Vivian observed her tone devoid of any critical judgment, but rather brimming with a profound, genuine curiosity. "Winning's simply not the most enjoyable part," Nia replied with an earnest, unwavering seriousness, her bright eyes fixed on the board. "The fun part, Miss Vivian, is all the wonderful things that happen before someone actually wins." The simple yet profoundly resonant wisdom embedded within Nia's unassuming statement struck Vivian with the force of a powerful, undeniable revelation. She had for so many relentless years focused solely and relentlessly on outcomes. Quarterly financial results, market share percentages, cutthroat competitive advantage, that she had tragically, utterly forgotten to pause and truly discern the rich, intricate texture of the experience itself. Playing chess with Nia was unequivocally not about demonstrating intellectual superiority or achieving a decisive victory. It was instead about the profound, unspoken connection, the boundless realm of pure imagination, the shared, unadulterated pleasure of two minds authentically meeting and intertwining across the 64 checkered squares. When Elijah, his face softened with an almost imperceptible tenderness, finally joined them at the table, an hour later the three of them, with a natural organic fluidity, commenced an entirely different kind of game altogether. They engaged in a collaborative form of team chess, with Nia enthusiastically advising both sides, creating intricate positions that were from a purely tactical standpoint, utterly nonsensical, yet remarkably rich with narrative possibility and imaginative scope. They invented wonderfully whimsical new rules, fabricating elaborate fantastical stories about the pieces, thereby transforming the ancient regal game into something delightfully playful and deeply collaborative rather than rigidly competitive and unequivocally zero-sum. "I brought something for you all," Vivian announced, eventually, her voice a little breathless with anticipation as she meticulously retrieved a small, elegantly wrapped package from the depths of her expensive purse. Inside, nestled securely within its soft tissue paper, was a brand new chess set, meticulously carved from beautifully lustrous maple and dark rich walnut. Each individual piece was a small, exquisite work of art, catching the golden, dappled light of the afternoon sun as it streamed in through the apartment windows, illuminating its intricate details. Nia's bright, intelligent eyes widened perceptibly with unadulterated delight as she carefully lifted each piece, her small fingers tracing its contours, examining the intricate details with the profound reverence of someone who intuitively understood that she was holding something truly precious and deeply cherished. "They are so utterly beautiful," she whispered, her voice a hushed murmur as she gently traced the carved mane of a knight with one small delicate finger. "Are they truly, really for me?" "They are indeed truly and unequivocally for you," Vivian confirmed, a burgeoning warmth spreading through her chest, a sensation that bore absolutely no relation to the child's expressed gratitude and everything instead to the simple, profound joy of giving without any underlying expectation of reciprocal return. "Your father tells me you are quickly becoming rather adept at the game." Elijah watched the entire heartwarming exchange with a complex expression that cycled gracefully through profound surprise, deep appreciation, and something far more profound, something deeper that caused Vivian's pulse to quicken perceptibly. "You did not truly have to undertake such a generous gesture," he said quietly, his voice imbued with a gentle sincerity. But she could, with an acute sensitivity, discern in his tone that he understood the profound gesture for precisely what it was. Not a detached act of impersonal charity, but rather a heartfelt offering, a meticulously constructed bridge spanning the vast, silent chasm that her harsh, ill-considered words had only recently so cruelly created between them. "I wanted to," she replied, her gaze meeting his dark, discerning eyes directly for the first time since their intense encounter at the hospital. "I have been profoundly contemplating your words, Elijah, about the very essence of sacrifice and what truly unequivocally matters most in this intricate tapestry of life. And I believe with a growing conviction that I have, for a very, very long time, been mistakenly playing the entirely wrong game." They conversed softly, their voices a low, comforting murmur, as Nia, oblivious to the profound depth of their discussion, joyfully explored her beautiful new chess set, meticulously arranging and rearranging the pieces in patterns that appealed purely to her burgeoning artistic sensibilities rather than to any discernible strategic logic. Their conversation was tentative at first, both of them cautiously navigating the emotional minefields of their recent painful conflict, but gradually imperceptibly, it found its natural, comforting rhythm. Elijah spoke openly with a quiet solemnity about his carefully laid plans for Nia's future care, the various specialists he had diligently consulted, the delicate, often precarious balance between enduring hope and harsh, undeniable financial reality that so profoundly governed their daily decisions. Vivian, in a remarkable turn, found herself openly confiding about the immense pressures inherent in corporate leadership in ways she had never ever done with anyone else, the profound, pervasive isolation that inextricably accompanied the weighty responsibility for hundreds of livelihoods and millions of dollars in crucial shareholder value. She spoke with a rare vulnerability about the viral video and its turbulent aftermath, the brutal, unceremonious way it had stripped away her meticulously constructed professional image, and in doing so, had mercilessly compelled her to confront with a stark honesty who she truly was beneath the impenetrable layers of her executive armor. The board, as you might imagine, is currently engaged in a comprehensive re-evaluation of my position. She admitted the words, feeling remarkably strange and unfamiliar as they left her mouth. Uncle Bernard is firmly convinced that I have irrevocably damaged the company's sterling reputation, and perhaps Elijah, he is undeniably correct. Are you then afraid of ultimately losing your job? Elijah inquired, his voice now imbued with a tone of profound, genuine concern. Vivian considered the deeply personal question with a newfound and intense seriousness. 6 months ago, the mere possibility of such a devastating outcome would have instilled an unadulterated terror within her, representing in her previous worldview the catastrophic collapse of everything she had relentlessly toiled to construct. But now, seated in this humble yet undeniably warm apartment, observing Nia joyfully playing with her beautiful new chess set, while her devoted father silently worried about mounting medical bills, she found with a startling clarity that her priorities had undergone a profound, almost seismic shift in ways she was only just beginning to truly comprehend. I am profoundly afraid of losing this, she articulated quietly, her hand making a gentle encompassing gesture that took in the three of them, the gentle warmth of the afternoon light filtering through the window, the comfortable, unassuming domesticity that had in some inexplicable way become infinitely more precious to her than any corporate achievement, no matter how grand. The final heartwarming scene unfolded 3 months later in the verdant backyard of the charming house they had with a shared vision purchased together. It was a modest yet undeniably comfortable place with ample room for Nia to joyfully play, and a burgeoning garden where Vivian, with a newfound sense of purpose, was painstakingly learning to cultivate living things other than the abstract metrics of profit margins. The beloved chess set rested serenely on the patio table between them, the intricately carved pieces catching the golden, late-afternoon light of a peaceful Sunday as they engaged in their weekly cherished game. These Sunday matches had over time evolved into a sacred, comforting ritual, less about the intensity of competition and far more about the simple, profound pleasure of spending unhurried time together, of quietly observing Nia engrossed in her book under the warm afternoon sun, while they, with a shared tranquility, moved pieces across the familiar checkered battlefield of 64 squares. The profound transformation in all their lives had been a gradual yet deeply meaningful process, marked not by dramatic sweeping gestures, but rather by the quiet, steady accumulation of small, intimate moments precisely like this one. "Your move, my dear," Elijah said, leaning back comfortably in his chair with the relaxed confidence of a man who had at last truly found his rightful place in the world. His face had miraculously shed the haunted, anxious quality that had so visibly marked it during Nia's most harrowing episodes, replaced now by an expression that resembled with an almost luminous clarity, profound contentment. The new medications, thanks to Vivian's unwavering efforts and connections, were unequivocally working their magic. The specialists whom Vivian's extensive network had recommended were, with a reassuring optimism, now speaking positively about Nia's long-term prognosis, and for the very first time in what felt like a lifetime, he could, with a dawning sense of hope, envision a future that extended far beyond the immediate terrifying specter of the next medical crisis. Vivian meticulously studied the board, not with her former relentless focus on calculating 3 strategic moves ahead, but simply profoundly enjoying the present moment. The soft, comforting pressure of Nia's head resting gently against her shoulder as the little girl, with an innocent serenity, read quietly in her lap. The chess position was intricate, yes, but not critically decisive. It was precisely the kind of game where the true pleasure resided in the unhurried act of playing itself, rather than in the ultimate outcome of winning. She had, through these shared experiences, learned to genuinely appreciate these drawn-out, wonderfully meandering matches that could at times last for several hours, punctuated by the easy flow of comfortable conversation and genuine laughter, and the occasional delightful interruption from Nia, who possessed firmly held opinions about absolutely everything and was refreshingly uninhibited about vocally sharing them. "If I execute this particular move," she began, indicating a formidable knight that would, in a calculated combination she had been meticulously setting up for the last 10 moves, expertly fork his king and queen, "and you, my brilliant opponent, respond precisely in the manner I anticipate you will, I just might, for once, actually manage to defeat you." It had, in its playful repetition, evolved into a running jest between them, her perpetual good-natured quest to finally vanquish the formidable man who had with such effortless grace checkmated her in a mere 3 moves during their very first unforgettable encounter. She had on a few tantalizing occasions come remarkably close, even managing to secure a couple of hard-fought draws. But Elijah's chess intuition remained as sharp, as incisive, and as unerring as ever honed by years of grueling high-level competition, a deeply ingrained muscle memory that time could simply not erase. "Might," Elijah agreed, his lips curving into a captivating smile that even now caused her heart to inexplicably skip a beat, just as it had on that momentous first evening when he had, with an unexpected directness, looked up from the reset board, and she had for the first time seen past his unassuming coveralls to the truly brilliant, profound mind that resided beneath. "Or perhaps I might once again surprise you. I have, after all, been known to do that from time to time." Nia looked up from her book, her young face assuming the serious, thoughtful expression she invariably wore when dispensing important, profound wisdom, a look that never for an instant failed to remind Vivian of her father's intense, unwavering focus, now beautifully tempered by her own innate, unshakable optimism. "Maybe, just maybe, you could both win," she suggested, her voice soft yet firm, a sentiment that had, with time, organically evolved into something akin to a cherished family motto. "Maybe winning isn't even about the chess game at all, truly." Vivian and Elijah exchanged a knowing glance across the familiar chessboard, both of them understanding with a profound and shared clarity that their beloved daughter, because that is precisely what Nia had officially and emotionally become to both of them, had once again, with an innocent yet piercing insight, identified the essential overarching truth that adults, in their relentless focus on cutthroat competition and often hollow achievement, sometimes tragically overlooked. The true game they were genuinely playing had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with 64 squares, and everything instead to do with the profound, intricate art of meticulously building a life unequivocally worth living. Piece by careful piece, move by thoughtful move, with unwavering intention. "You know what, Elijah?" Vivian said, her voice soft with emotion, as she reached across the table to gently take his hand, feeling the comforting calluses that eloquently spoke of honest, diligent work, and the immense inner strength that had, with an unyielding resilience, carried them all through the arduous, difficult months of profound adjustment and quiet healing. "I truly believe she's absolutely right. I think my love that we both have already won in the most meaningful ways imaginable." The intricately carved chess pieces sat momentarily forgotten on the patio table as the three of them, a newfound family unit, dissolved into warm, unrestrained laughter, the joyous sound carrying across their small, verdant backyard like a profound whispered promise of all the myriad games yet to be played, all the shared victories yet to be wholeheartedly celebrated, and all the boundless love yet to be discovered in the simple yet profound act of consistently choosing each other one thoughtful move at a time. The golden afternoon light filtered gently through the delicate leaves of the beautiful maple tree they had, with a shared sense of purpose, carefully planted together last spring, casting dappled dancing shadows across the chessboard, where their unfinished game patiently awaited their eventual return. But for now, the real game, the one that truly profoundly mattered most of all, was already unequivocally won. Played out not in the precise calculated movement of carved pieces across a checkered battlefield, but rather in the quiet, precious moments of ordinary, unadulterated happiness that had, in their newfound reality, become the true immeasurable measure of their enduring success.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.